As we get ready for this weekend, Dibs has laid the gauntlet down on Brandon Aiyuk.
Someone has to.
Show me, Brandon. Be $30 million dude. Be that guy. And I'm sitting here going like, well, yeah, you're not wrong, and I understand the emotion. And so I have two responses. One, tried to warn you, Brandon. I told you weren't going to be forgiven, and this was not the way to go about doing it because people are still going to hang this over your head. But my other reaction is, I get why you're making it about this weekend, but that part's not Brandon's fault. So like the $30 million, I'd argue, is coming up in your mind because Debo is hurt and Christian is hurt and now George might be hurt. That's totally out of Brandon's hands. I don't want him to play well this weekend because his teammates are hurt. I want him to play well this weekend because there's a game, and I'll feel that way again next weekend and week 10 when all of these guys are back.
You know what's also out of his hands, Mark?
The ball.
Thank you. You know me pretty well. I probably set that up a little. I probably telegraphed that a little too strong, but I get what you're saying. And for me, it's not a week 3 or bust scenario. But I look.
It sounds like it a little bit.
It's not week 3 or bust.
Okay.
But it's a show me here in week 3 because you missed camp because you held in, and you could have signed the same contract that you ended up taking a week or 2 earlier, which would have made you more ready or readier, which I don't think is a word. We'll go with more ready. It would have made you more ready for week 3 had you actually had camp. So fine. Week 1, you were not quite ready and you had a couple of drops, including a touchdown pass that you should have had. Week 2, you still weren't totally ready. And well, this one kind of hurts because you lost to Minnesota and now you're 1-1 going to LA. And you don't have Debo, and you don't have Christian, and George Kittle today couldn't practice with a hamstring. So George Kittle, as we sit now 3 days away from game time, he probably will be officially listed as questionable. So you might be the only legit, highly paid skill guy able to play on Sunday. So yeah, all eyes on you, Brandon Aiyuk.
How well do you know me as a co-host? Of everything you just said, what do you think I'm going to respond to?
Whether or not readier is a word.
Yeah, good job,
And I don't think it's a word.
No, I think it is. It is.
How about readiest?
No, Oxford English Dictionary, readier. In fact, the first known use of the word readier was back in the 1920s, and specifically in 1922 in the Daily Mail.
Okay.
That's the first time readier was used.
Yeah, I still will default to more ready. Readier seems to me.
I couldn't be any more ready. I couldn't be readier. Yeah.
More ready feels better to me. The greater point is that you had your 2 preseason games, which unfortunately were regular season games.
Oh, you're not wrong.
And
sure.
you were great.
No, dude, yes, perform well. Perform well. But I am completely ready and happy as a damn clam, and I don't even know that clams are that happy, but like happy as a clam. Niners win 27-17. Brandon has 3 catches for 42 yards and no scores. Fine. Did the offense perform well? Did you move the ball? Good. He doesn't need to be the dog. He just needs to play his position. I don't know how the Rams are going to defend this. If that leads to other people being open, sweet.
It's bigger than that. If you win the game 9-8 and he has 4 drops, he has 2 catches for 9.
That's a different conversation.
Well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Brandon Aiyuk.
I understand, but that doesn't need to be this weekend. Like, I would come after Brandon any week that he did that.
Right, but this is the first week that I'm looking at him squarely and saying, all right, 30 mil, now's your time. Because we need you now more than we needed you in weeks 1 or week 2.
See, I'd kind of argue it's already been time to come down the road. And I didn't want to get into this for multiple reasons. A, we exhausted ourselves in the entire world with the name Brandon Aiyuk.
For 5 months,
well, at least for 2.
Yep.
We exhausted everybody with it. Secondarily, the 49ers had a phenomenal night last Monday. And Brandon did not play well. I don't care what your metric is. He did not play well.
And we talked about it in the aftermath.
Right, but the Niners had a wonderful night, and there was no reason to harp on that fact. And then come the next game where Brandon was maybe a touch bit better, but the larger issue was The 49ers were not. And quite frankly, not really in any position group. A couple individuals were fine, but no position group nailed it in the game in Minnesota. So Brandon was not the focus. But I would argue that if you really do want to make things about Brandon, he has already had an horrific start to the season. Horrific. And quite frankly, I'm not really sure why it hasn't bothered people more. This guy held the hell out, got no extra dollars for it, came to camp, smiled at the media and went, yeah, I was kind of a pain in the butt toward the end, then walked out on the field, dropped a ball in the end zone that was the dime of the year from Brock Purdy, has 6 catches in 2 weeks, and the Niners are frustratingly 1-1. And we're like, okay, now play. No, dude. Where you been?
No, now play.
No, you should have been playing.
Fine, but if you want to look at the first 2 games and you want to talk about the biggest issues with the team, Brandon Aiyuk is probably 4th or 5th on the list of issues with the 49ers,
well,
I would say.
I guess.
I would look at an offensive line, the right side, that has been porous. I would look at a defensive secondary that's been confused at times. And then if you want to get down to Brandon Aiyuk and his ineffectiveness, yeah, we could talk about that.
I don't disagree with that, but I'm looking at it more through the lens of, I'm not like, okay, what level of an issue is he with the 49ers? I'm just telling you, the same thing I told you last month. I was turned off by it then. I'm turned off by it now. You left your teammates high and dry. You took everybody on a goose chase. It got nowhere. You got your money. Then you laughed about it. And here we are not performing. That's not good. I'm okay. I'm not good. It's okay. This is recoverable. And again, for me, this is about the next 5 years. But there's no way to look at what Brandon has done to this point. It's not excusable. It's recoverable.
Of course.
But this is always going to be something that happened, and I will always and forever, no matter where this goes from here, I will always look at the way he handled this offseason as very poor.
I agree with all of that, but I'm not looking at 5 years. I'm looking at week 3. And this is where, for me, you want to talk about recoverable. The recovery has to start this weekend.
It would help, I'll agree.
Because you don't have Debo. You may not have George. I'd say George right now is probably 50-50 to play.
Feels like it best.
Well, he sat out today with a hamstring. And
because it's a hamstring, that's sort of right? Why would you push this suddenly 3 days from now?
Agreed, but you might push it because you don't have a lot of other skill position guys. But then again, you might not push it because you feel like the Rams are depleted too, and you feel like maybe, if you rest George, he could be ready for the Patriots game or, a bigger game down the road. You've got Seattle and Arizona coming up and the rest of it. But I look at this game and Brandon Aiyuk, and I think, okay, you want this to be recoverable, then go out and have 8 catches for $122 and a touchdown in a victory. That's how you start the recovery.
It would certainly help. You don't
start the recovery with a 2-catch game against the Jets, including 2 drops, and then a 4-catch ho-hum game against Minnesota where, let's be fair, he was not very impactful in that game.
No.
He had a catch in I think the first play from scrimmage was a throw to Aiyuk. And then it was the first or second play from scrimmage.
Okay.
He had a catch.
Okay.
And then he had 3 other catches, and you'd be hard-pressed to remember those catches.
You're talking about the Minnesota game.
Correct.
I thought you were talking about the Jets game.
No, the Minnesota game, he either had the first catch or the second catch.
I think you're right.
I know they threw it 3 times and then punted.
Yeah, it was a 2-yard catch. I think the second play from scrimmage. He had one more target later on, and then his second catch came halfway through the third quarter.
Oof.
Very unimpactful.
Yeah. But and I know you're not saying otherwise. I the Niners win and Brandon doesn't pop statistically is way better to me than the Niners lose and Brandon goes for $120.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I know you agree with that. But Dollar Bill in the city next up here on Willard and Dibs. Again, Jay Gruden's going to join us in 15 minutes. Hi, Dollar Bill. What's up?
Hey, boys. Hey, one of the things I love about listening to you guys is, you guys can argue, and it's the opposite of when I argue with my wife, where the only 2 outcomes are, she's right or I'm wrong. When I listen to you guys can both be right at the same time, where Yeah, as a fan, you want to, who cares? You win, it's the greatest antiseptic. But when you get as both of you guys just said, if you get the big bag, and the way he went about it was kind of a little diva-ish, and then, the first couple weeks of the year, you're not really performing, well, then the pressures are going to build and build and build. And every week that he does not perform, the echoes are going to get louder and louder and louder. And this is the week where you want to be a baller, you got to ball out because you're it.
Dollar Bill, thanks so much.
Thanks, Dollar.
And like in the end, and everybody knows this isn't going to be some super smart comment or whatever, but like it's just like what we saw with the Jets. The guy dropped a touchdown pass in his first game after taking everybody on an absolute annoying ride.
Right.
And nobody cared because the Niners won.
Exactly.
Like
that was like a 3 on the scale of 1 to 10 in terms of outrage because they were dominant, they won, and it was just kind of like, ooh, that was a thing. And we talked about on Tuesday, like, what were the negatives of the game? And you had to really think long and hard about the negatives. It's like, ooh, yeah, Brandon Aiyuk with 2 drops, including a dime in the end zone. That sucked. But anyway, nice win.
Exactly.
That was it.
This is all going to get baked into whether or not the 49ers win. And he can take his damn sweet time as long as the Niners are winning. He really can. It just won't bother people that much. If they
much.
Yeah. Because that's what this is about. And the second he signs, I'm making the effort at least not to do the $30 million thing.
I mean, because you said at the time, look, you're out on Brandon Aiyuk.
This was prior to the signing.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you also said at the time, when he signs and he's a Niner, you're going to cheer for him all the same because you're a 49er fan.
Right, and I'm going to move on. And I have. And although I'm explaining to you right now, I think pretty clear, I still think that was really poorly done. He's here. Great. I hope he performs really well. It's off to the start that it's off to. But whatever, and that's the way I'm going to move forward. He's here now for a pretty long time, and I want the 49ers to win football games while he's here. I am not going to lose sleep over whether or not he gets 1,300 yards or 1,100 yards, or even if, oh dear, there's a 900-yard season. I just don't. When the Niners score, I don't care who got in. I just don't care. But if the Niners are struggling, and this is where, again, I really do get where you're coming from, you want it to be Brandon this week because it looks like it should be. But I will be totally fine if Brandon Aiyuk goes out there, draws a lot of eyeballs, and Juwan Jennings goes off. And his numbers stink, and the Niners win by 10. Sweet.
Well,
that's cool.
Everything is different based on the result and how it looks. And you can have a team... You can go out there and beat the Rams 5-3, and the offense is terrible across the board, and you win 5-3, and Aiyuk has 1 catch for 9 yards and 2 fumbles. We're going to think differently. Even though the Niners win, we're going to still come back on Monday, and we're going to look at things differently. So, or they lose to the Rams 28-24, and Aiyuk has 13 catches for $170. They lose, and that's going to suck, but we'll look at Brandon Aiyuk and we'll go, you know what? BA balled out. They needed him to, and he's going to get his flowers. So it's not as clear cut to me as win or lose will color our opinions.
Any football game, win or lose, is going to lead to potentially new concerns. The Jets game didn't because they looked dominant in many, many phases. If they lose the game 28-24, I got all kinds of concerns about the defensive side of the football with a new regime.
Could be special teams. You never know how it,
and if they win 5-3, I got all kinds of concerns about what's going to happen next. So all of that is fair. I'm just not pinning it on Brandon to go be some sparkly numbers fantasy performer this weekend.
I'm not either.
Yeah, it's about
to me, it's not about sparkly fantasy numbers.
You said be the dog.
Be the dog. Go out there and be the dog. Get open, catch the ball, and earn your money. $30 million a year, and I know that doesn't kick in until next year. And ultimately, it's a team game. I get that. And if they win, all opinions will be colored based on the result from the team. in general. But for me, this is a game where you don't have Debo or McCaffrey, and George Kittle, even if he plays, will most likely be somewhat hampered. This is a game where offensively, I would look to Brandon Aiyuk as a guy who I should be able to rely on for a big game to help us win the football game.